Welcome to the beautiful city of Athens, the gateway to the Tennessee Valley, a city rooted in deep community relationships and built on a rich tradition of small local business and the very best of the human spirit. As Athens embraces the future, the signs of progress are in full bloom. Join us as we discover the bright spots in this charming southern city that we call home. This is Hometown Heartbeat, Athens. What's going on, everybody? Zach Walker here, Hometown Heartbeat episode... Hold on, I can't hear you. Now.
49, I believe.
49. That's 49 straight days I've done this. I've never been committed to anything like that in my life. My wife's like, 49? He can't even take the trash out 2 weeks in a row. But no, we started this thing as a response to the almighty coronavirus that was just, you know, this big pandemic's going to kill 2 million. In case you missed that, 2 million people are going to die.
I did miss that.
Did you?
Yeah.
But no, today is a very special day. First of all, before I introduce my guest, we got to say hello to Connor. Connor loves this part.
Me. Hello.
Hey, buddy. How are you, man?
Doing good. Good to be here, as usual. And I'm going to come back to you. Whoop. There we go.
That's more words than we normally get. He's a quiet man.
Man, a few words.
But powerful, impactful words. A lot like me in a lot of ways. Few words.
That.
All right. So look, today is a day that I've both been excited about and dreaded since I reached out to Tresa and asked her to join me. But Tresa Roth has known me since I was 8, I guess, 9, maybe at the oldest. And so we grew up in North Virginia, which we have decided is not the South, for those of you that are curious. Just slightly south of that. There's like a Mason-Dixon line in Virginia, in a way. But she has no the good, the bad, the ugly. Most of it was bad and ugly, beyond like 13 to like 30. But no.
The hopeful.
Hopeful. That's a good way that's a really kind way of putting lost cause at the time. No, I'm just kidding. But Teresa's been around our family forever. Teresa's husband, Bob, was my hero growing up in a lot of ways. I'll never forget when he showed up at my house when I had been acting in one of those less than hopeful ways. And my mom and dad couldn't do anything about it, and they called in the cavalry, and he rolled up our driveway. It was 100 yards long. And it's like this death march as he drives. And I'll never forget that we went out and he in that old truck, and we went and got some ice cream. Literally, we just drove around, and it was like there was not a mean word said. There wasn't a raised voice. It was just man, you're screwing up, you know, and like this genuine care. And it impacted my life in a lot of ways. And so today's going to be hard for me. Because Bob meant so much to me in my life, but obviously not as much of an impact as it had on your family. And so I want to just set up the path to where what we said we were going to talk about, which, by the way, we very rarely talk about what we act like we're going to talk about. So if this takes a hard right, that's okay. Feel free to go anywhere you'd like. But Bob was a special agent with the FBI and is on the wall of I had it. What's it called? It's their wall it's like their hero's wall or whatever they call that.
Wall of Honor.
Boom.
It's a martyr's wall. And he's also at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial.
Where am I? Is that an echo or is that coming from outside, Connor? I'm sorry. Outside. Okay. All right. So he was one of the first men. He was in. Oh, there's more of that. This is normal. Don't worry. He was in Quantico, firearms testing, firearms qualification on September 11th, 2001. And he got a phone call that, as everyone knows, the towers were hit, the Pentagon was hit, and then another plane went down in Pennsylvania. And so Bob immediately answered that call, went to the building. Ton of cool stories about the things that some of the people that we knew in the area that were had either left their badge and couldn't get back in. I remember that one very specifically. But he was one of the first guys there, and for 17 days?
About that.
About 17 days. He was there 12 hours a day, sifting through wreckage. I read today where he was in charge of the evidence collection and kind of oversaw that effort. And from that, like if you knew Bob, first of all, Bob would run into, like, he never ran away from anything. Like he faced everything in just this head on. Like I love hearing the stories about the golf trips from my dad, talking about they would go play golf, and just Bob's personality, his smile, he wasn't afraid of anything, but he was also very wise and very smart, and it was very calculated in a way. Like it's like everything he said had an impact almost. Like there was no empty words or no empty actions. He was a man of great purpose, I guess would be a way. Incredible athlete, very well. I mean, in shape. I mean, just took care of all of that. Would always show up in fun vehicles from time to time that maybe he had picked up. He did a lot of task force stuff with drug cartel type stuff. He would show up in crazy cars that you're like, man, I didn't think special agents could afford that. And then he had just taken it off a drug dealer or something. And so it was just a really cool life that he lived. And then 9/11 happened. And so walk me through this process, because you've championed this, been a part of championing this you're being an advocate for the Victim Rights Fund and all the things that were passed, I guess, in July. And so we'll get to that. But just I listened to a podcast today of you talking to an FBI agent about just him coming home and the impact that what he saw and what he did had on him. And I want to talk through that first. So explain, like, a lot of us see the video, we see the pictures, and everyone has a certain reaction, but very few of them were there. And you really had a front row seat to the atrocities that were kind of committed on our nation. What was that like for Bob as he walked through that process?
Well, like you said, he is not one to shirk from anything that is alarming. However, one of his fears was all these cameramen were flying over and videoing everything. And he said, what if you find like half a body and you have this visceral reaction and it's videoed for the whole world to see? And that bothered him. He said, you're supposed to try to do your job every day and stay focused. And it's really hard to stay focused when there's all this media flying around. So we would actually pray that God would put a blinder on the things that he didn't need to see or pay attention to, and laser him on the things he did need to focus on. And it really was a benefit to him to have that specific prayer, because you can't be focused on the riffraff. You have to stay focused on what is the priority. And that was his concern, and I'm glad that he laid it before me as his wife, and that we could pray about it together and address it, and I could help hold him accountable and help him stay focused with that as much as I could. But they may look like a man of steel, but everybody still has something that bothers them. And not doing your mission well was something that bothered him. He didn't want to not do it well.
Because in all fairness, I don't know that I can point to anything that I saw that he didn't do well. Like what he did most of the time, he did well, judging by his legacy that he's left in the kids and the wife and the family. Like he did that really well. And so for all of us that knew Bob and looked at, he was just a man of excellence in a lot of ways. And I can't, the responsibility that, one of the things I heard in the podcast I listened to today, and by the way, I'm referencing a podcast that Tresa did with the FBI. It's called Inside the FBI. And if you'd like to go listen to that, you really should, because there's a lot of really neat information in there that I don't really want to spend a lot of time on for the purposes of this conversation, but a lot of context in that. And one of the things you said was when the FBI hired Bob, I like to think that they hired the both of us because we went into this as a team, as a pair. You supported him in his work, although dangerous, although there was time away from family, there was, things that were necessary. And so what level of responsibility did you feel in that? Because I feel like when my wife brings stuff home, certainly the opposite. When I bring things home, I know that she totes it it's very heavy, in a lot of ways. But what level of, what does that feel like? Because you're obviously praying, you're obviously spending time trying to encourage and lift up, but some of the things that were in that, just the things he saw and the things that he either did or didn't want to talk about, like how does that impact I don't know, those 17 to 20 to 30 to and extending into months, I'm sure, as the investigation was ongoing and all of that. But how did that impact you and him? And did it, I mean, a lot of people talk about, you know, you see things you can't unsee. They change you. Like, explain a little bit of that if you can, in terms of just how it affected you, and then how you think, if it at all affected Bob.
One of the things that really affected him was a day that they were searching for bodies, and they had a list of all of the passengers on the plane that they were looking for, and a list of the employees at the Pentagon. So one particular incident that bothered him was they found a body part that belonged to a girl about the age of our girl. And he was really shaken by that. You know, he said, it just made me think how those parents would feel. And we determined that the parents were on the flight, so hey. But somebody is missing that girl, and how he personalized it as how he would feel. And I reminded him that you have to personalize it to the point of empathy to the family, but you have to put it into perspective that that was quick for that girl. And it was quick for her family. And praise God it was, because if those terrorists had made it agonizing, I don't think that this country would be able to withhold their furor over that.
And one of the things, I was talking with my business partner right before this, and obviously he's never met, but he knows who Bob is, because I've talked about 9/11. That day, to me, like, he's the guy that I remember in that, because there was the most impacted person that I know personally. And so my partner's very patriotic. 9/11 comes around, and we talked about Bob, this, that, and the other. I told him that you were joining us today, and he made a point that there's so many tie-ins to what we're experiencing as a country now, and what and the very first day that we got on here, 48 business days ago, I called it the ground zero effect. It's a ground zero moment in a way. And for me, I was a freshman in high school. I was old enough to understand exactly what was happening. My father, like most of our fathers and husbands in Northern Virginia, were in the defense world, or in law enforcement, or in some kind of government agency. There was a lot of the jobs there, and just that ground zero effect is something I have a hard time putting in words in a way, but like, the country experienced it on a mass scale, in terms of, you got Sammy Sosa running around the bases with a flag, and you've got all these tributes to America, but the tie-ins between the way that our country reacted then and what we're dealing with now are something I definitely want to come back to and tie it all in. But it's just that the way that we rallied around those first responders, and the way, and I would love for you to speak to that, just even for a moment, about like I hope an outpouring and overwhelming response to guys like Bob, who were the first guys on the ground, just literally moving body parts of deceased Americans, and just kind of, I mean, was that overwhelming in a sense, in terms of just like, obviously the attention was for Bob, right? He didn't like that part, but just that constant want to know questions. What do you know, but also support and encouragement. Like, is that an overwhelming feeling to be in that?
It wasn't for us. And I think partly because he'd been in the job long enough, and I worked in a secure environment beforehand. So we didn't share that information around.
Sure.
And the area that we lived in offered us the flexibility of not having to share things.
Sure.
So when people would ask us questions or ask him questions, he was very calculated, as he always was, and he would say, it's been tough.
Yeah.
You know, you can pray for those families. Or he would say, we've got a new mission. We're focusing on the new mission of figuring out what happened here. And he was always calculated and focusing on the mission. And I think that helped him stay focused. And at the time, my mission was raising kids at home. And our fourth child, Jack, was born in October of '01. So I was busy at home myself.
Sure.
But, just those times of conversations in the evenings of, how was work today, really? And what's going on? And his mission was always on the forefront of what we're going to do next, what the work plan was next and what his plan was next, and looking ahead. And I think that looking ahead and knowing what you're going after keeps you from looking behind at what you could have, should have done, and feeling sorry for yourself.
Sure. No, that's and that just that resolve. It wasn't an anger response. Certainly there was anger in the response, but it was a resolute, like we are going to right this wrong. We're going to do whatever it is that we have to do as a country, as an agent. It was an individual mission, but it also was much greater than that. And for the first time in probably a long time, a country that is now more divided than ever, but at that point the division had started, was starting, whatever, but like we came together in a way that I've not seen in my lifetime. I've not seen anything like that. I hope that one day we'll see that again. I hope it doesn't take
under different circumstances
another great catastrophe to get us there. But no. So let's go back a second. Let's talk about how old was Bob when all this went down, give or take, in 2001. And math is tough. I'm not good at it either. But just in general, how long had he been an FBI agent? Was that something he always wanted to do? What was kind of his going into that? You have to be a special person to want to do what he did.
You do. He did not always want to be an FBI agent. He did have an undergrad in law enforcement, and his master's was in U.S. and Soviet foreign policy. And
whoa! Bet you won't find that in college anywhere today.
Well, it's vogue now that the whole Russian.
That's right. No, that's right. It's coming back. Okay, fair enough.
But at the time, he was encouraged. He had been a summer employee at the CIA, and he had been encouraged to get this master's degree so that he could work at the agency, and he did. And when he finished getting his degree, the Cold War ended, and he often joked that Gorbachev ended his career, and Bob's.
That's funny.
You pursue one thing thinking that it's going to be the ticket to what you want, and you have to make adjustments. And it was a very humbling time for him because he already had his application in. It was in process at the agency, and he had to switch gears.
And for a lot of people that didn't grow up in Northern Virginia, and like my dad and I talk about this all the time, because it's hard for other people that didn't grow up in that environment. Like Dad's only recently told me now that certain clearances, timelines start to run out and things like that. But just things like, man, you knew some guys, you didn't know it, but you knew some guys that were some real heavy hitters in this area and in that area. And we just grew up that way. And like you said earlier, the concept of clearance and secure, like, that was normal for us. So when you asked someone a question and the answer, it was very clear, and you didn't go past that. For those of you that didn't grow up there, like the CIA and the FBI, a lot of people would look at that and say, two horns on the same goat. Not even close. Very, very different. Very, very different missions. Very, very different job descriptions, if you will. Both in law enforcement. Both very much similar in a lot of ways, but the mission is very different. Law enforcement. No, it's not. I said today I wasn't going to be political, so I'm not going to be. But CIA does a lot of stuff that you never hear about or know about, or like that's your Jason Bournes of the world. For those, just to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator, FBI is a law enforcement agency, and so if you had your heart set on the agency, and then you ended up with that not being an option, I could understand how that would be a disappointment, because it's probably not as sexy. I mean, if we're being honest, CIA, that's a pretty cool, if you actually know what they do, it's a pretty cool gig, It's I don't know.
Ordinary than you might
they could
think.
I don't know, Jason Bourne might disagree with you. No, I'm kidding. But so the FBI starts, and then he's an agent for how long? Just give or take.
12 years.
Okay, so he'd been an agent for a while. 9/11 happens. He spends bunches of days, bunches of hours there, and then let's fast forward to. I read another article that you were interviewed. It may have been the L.A. Times, where you said it felt like Bin Laden had reached out from the grave, and so he's out playing with the kids or whatever in the neighborhood. He's got a limp, thinks he's got a hip flexor problem. When was that year-wise? I mean, how long after the attack did he start to feel the effects of that?
That was on her birthday. He had a doctor's appointment on her birthday, and that was in 2006. About a month before that, he had taken the kids. He had gone on a run, and I had taken baby number 5 in the stroller, and
they've got a basketball team. By the way.
He was on a run. The other kids were on their bikes or scooters, and I came home and I saw him walking up the street limping, and I asked him what happened, and he said he thought he pulled his hip flexor. You know, as a runner, you've pulled your hip flexor before. You don't think anything of it. It's ice, Motrin. You alternate your activities, and you move on. And he did, and it didn't get better. And we had some crutches that I'd purchased at a yard sale for the kids to play with, and he started using those because he couldn't pivot without a lot of pain. And it just wasn't getting better after a few weeks, so he called and asked for an MRI. And it was on our firstborn's birthday, and you know, you wouldn't think that you're going to be hit with the word cancer on that day, or you certainly wouldn't plan it. But thankfully, because he was off work that day, we had pancake breakfast birthday, and his appointment was later that afternoon. So it did kind of seem like a different day. And he called me and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm making dinner, you know." And he said, "You need to go to the garage away from the kids." And I had received calls like that before, but not from a doctor's office. And I got to the doctor's office, and he said, he started whispering, and he said, "They've got me in a chair, and they don't want me to stand up, and they're whispering words, and the word is cancer." And I said, "About you?" You know, it was just so unbelievable that it would be about him, you know, and we thought, surely not. He was the office health nut, in great shape.
Ironman, triathlon. I mean, anything he wanted to do, he did
guessed.
it. Yeah, that's right.
So that was our first hint, and he went on to have his hip replaced about a week later.
I was about to say, it was pretty quick there from like, because they said one of the things, and again, I did my homework today. It's like I know the family, but I didn't know the story this well. And so, but they said they put him in a wheelchair because they were afraid his femur would sever his femoral artery because his hip was gone for all intents and purposes. And so immediately hip replacement, and then it kind of, cancer's gone, everybody's happy, we're dancing out, like
we
party.
were told it was gone, and we went back for a follow-up, and one doctor said, you know, I want to do some blood work. We're going to do a bone marrow biopsy. And I said, okay, and they did, and the test results came back that he had multiple myeloma, and it was a severe strain and aggressive. So we went to Johns Hopkins, and they told us that he probably had maybe 6 weeks to 6 months to live, probably more like 6 weeks because the aggressive nature of this cancer. And we just sat there with a picture of our 5 kids, and we said, that's just not good enough. So he found a program at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and it is called the Myeloma Institute, and they deal specifically with multiple myeloma, and they're world-renowned. And their average life expectancy was 8.9 years. So we went out there, and he ended up only living a year and a half, but it's a year and a half that we got.
That's right. His funeral was one of the things that I'll never forget. It was cold. It was late March, I guess. So my birthday is early March, and then and so it's easy for me to. And my mom and I came down, and it was the weather that day was just, I'll never forget. There was
craziest thing.
It was like out of nowhere, and it was snow, right? I told my mom that. She was like, I don't know, did it snow? But we were in the car, we had just finished the service. We were going to and it just out of nowhere just snows like crazy. And then the sun came out. I mean, just like that. I'll never forget as long as I live. And that was just him, you know, that was just him. And I've always taken it as, that was a sign for me. It was God just kind of reaching out and saying like, hey, he's all right, you know? And I want to, and we're going to play a clip here in a minute from Bob and a recording that he had made for his family that I had not heard until earlier today. By the way, walking around Walmart, I heard it for the first time, and I'd had to tell people I was worried about the coronavirus. They're like, "Why are you crying?" It's the virus. I'm scared. But Lisa Gerard says, "I remember that day too." Lisa, I hope you're well. Thanks for tuning in. But so Bob, a year and a half later, he's no longer with us, and you immediately, quickly, somebody set the alarm off in our studio. So you immediately, quickly, how long? He was the FBI's first acknowledged cancer from the Pentagon. He was the very first agent to be acknowledged as saying what happened to him was because of what. So how long was it before you took up the cause? I mean, starting to get out there and say, hey, like we've got a group of people that on our nation's darkest day in 100 years stepped up, answered the call, and they're now suffering and dying because of it, and we're not doing anything to help.
It was actually quite a while, and the reason is because there was no declaration that it was associated. So Department of Labor could not say for sure that these people were developing cancer as a result of their interactions with 9/11 cancerous items. So they didn't do anything about it. But then it came to a point where so many people who were responders were passing away, they couldn't help but do something about it. So things really started shaking up, and it finally came to the point where the National Safety and Occupation Organization NIOSH allowed the independent agencies to declare, their medical team could declare whether these people died from causes associated with first responder work.
That's an interesting concept, giving the agency their independence to make decisions. That's weird. We wouldn't know anything about that nowadays. It's also, I find it quite humorous that it's really hard to tie, there's not a lot of science or allegedly to back that up, yet nowadays we're shutting the world down with a very little same government, by the way. But we're not going there today. I've already said it. I'm not going there today. So I'll just wait till after we talk about Bob, and then I promise I'll go there. But no. So you take up this call, and I remember the first time I saw like somebody shared a Facebook. It was an article, it was whatever, and it was like you on the in the LA Times. I'm like, what's going on? And because we moved, we left, and I mean we left when we had already left when Bob died. I mean, we'd been gone, and so we haven't seen each other in a long time, and so I wasn't on top of it or in the loop. And all of a sudden, it's like Tresa Roth going to Congress, gonna in your pictures and your story and Bob's story, and I saw so much of Bob in that, and just your fight for. I mean, that's exactly who he was. Like you weren't going to be a bully. You weren't going to, you were going to do the right thing by people, or you were going to have to, just ask me about it. My mom called Bob when I wasn't doing, I promise you were going to do the right thing. And so I remember just embracing that and just saying, man, that is absolutely, like, he would be so honored in that. And you were so much of him in that, but also the woman that he married was very much resolute in the same way that he was. And so, what was that journey? Because that's a terrifying thing to me. Like I don't think I want to go, like Washington is a very place to me. Like it's a place where the right thing doesn't typically, in my opinion, shake out. People don't get treated fairly. There's no justice for those that are. So, did it feel like an enormous mountain to climb, or?
It felt like a journey that I was on with like-minded people, and I'm very thankful to be able to say that. And the Bureau was very supportive, and I can definitively say that the FBI had people who are currently still on our team and who were encouraging it all. They were very good to us then. They're very good to us now. They would do everything that we needed to do to help promote the cause through the FBI Agents Association, through top tier folks who wanted to see people get helped. And I went to several funerals. They were well represented by the top tier, who were equally as disappointed as the rest of us are. And it was heartwarming to see that. And I can say that we've made friends with a lot of really great people who some people might not always like, but we have respected so many of them on different levels for their participation in all of this.
Yeah, I saw a picture of the family with Robert Mueller in front of a statue that we saw on there. But and so all that leads up to the culmination of, in July, right, of last year, getting or extending the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund for another 70 years at a cost of $10.2 billion per decade, which should hopefully be plenty of fun. Of course, we saw how fast the CARES Act money went away, but for the limited amount, and I say limited very respectfully. I mean, when you look at the grand scale of the country and our population, the amount of people that were on one of those 4 sites on that one day in that 1 year is a relatively small number in terms of, and so $10.2 billion, hopefully. I mean, ultimately, you're satisfied with the outcome and with the...
I am, and there's also the health program. So it helps people with all of their health issues and workers' compensation benefits. So there is multi-tiers for assistance now through all of this. And then the program to help families in need has just been great. There are fundraising efforts that go just through other venues, like there's the Police Unity Tour, which last year they raised $2.5 million. Different groups went biking on a tour, essentially. Wow. I was on a team a few years ago from Upper New Jersey. We biked down to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and grouped in with other cyclists who came in for the tour, and each rider raised funds. And together we all raised $2.5 million. A lot of it goes to families, to scholarships, to programs to help those efforts. And some of the money goes to smaller organizations that also help at a grassroots level. So it was great to be part of that. The FBI Agents Association also has a great scholarship program that has been assistance to my children, and we try to help them promote that through their golf tournament and other things that they do. So it's nice that we can be local to help encourage those efforts and put a face with a name for people who say, oh, terrorism doesn't happen on our country. This is our soil. We're Americans. This doesn't happen here. And it does. And people forget, So
no, it's so crazy to me. Me and Connor were talking about the other day about 9/11 and how old he is and how like it's a history book thing for him. And there are,
because we're old.
That's what we are. I refuse to accept that yet, but I am.
But I'm older than you.
Yeah, and come on, you not a day over like 34. I mean, it just might make the kid thing a little awkward, but but no, we were talking about how it's like, revisionist history is such a big problem right now for a lot of, we want to make our history politically correct, or we want to not, and one of the things, it's like I can't imagine living in a world where people don't understand exactly what happened on that day, and that another group of people meant to do harm to our people and to our country, and they did that. They killed 3,500 people, more or less, on that day.
Right.
Not to mention Bob and the ranks of the scores of men and women that selflessly gave their, not knowing even at the time, because that's what you do.
Right.
The mission changed, and the mission was to do exactly that, and in doing that cost him his life. And it's the legacy. Part of what I wrote in leading up to this was about the legacy that Bob left, and that's something that I want people to understand, and I want to play. I can't even freaking say it. I want to play the audio from the last thing that Bob recorded for the family. There's just a brief excerpt that I want everyone to hear. I want you to hear the hope and he was resolute to one thing at the end of his life, and that was his hope and his faith that came through Christ Jesus, and only in that. And so I just want you to hear this, because this is a man that was an elite operator of the FBI. He was a special agent. He could run, bike, he could do anything he wanted to do. There's nothing that Bob Roth, if he wanted to do it, there's nothing he couldn't do. And in this moment, he could do nothing. He'd fought. At one point, he said, no more. The lesions are too much. Like, we can't go through this one more time. So here I am, Lord. Right. Like, it's time. And I just want you to hear these words, because you won't hear something more impactful today, I can guarantee you, but probably if you listen to a lot of content from a lot of people, this, I hope, will change your life, because Bob changed mine. And so I just want you to hear this, and we're going to listen to it now. Go ahead, Connor.
I've had a great life. I've got a fantastic wife. I've got great kids who bless my life every day. At the very end, I am disappointed. But what I've been through health-wise is a disgusting process. But through that, I have received great blessings. And that reinforces my trust of God's plan. I would prefer to stay around and raise my kids. God has other things that he apparently has planned and wants to handle, and that's just his prerogative. It is not my prerogative. And I'm okay with that.
Those are powerful words. And he meant them. Everything he said, that was so much who he was. And just like my son, it's like we read our books and we've got our superheroes. He's big on superheroes right now. And he knows Bob, because that's a man that my dad, before Bob ever passed away, like my dad called Bob Roth his hero. And Bob left such an impact on this world. And I really just wanted to get together and just talk about his life and celebrate his life. But more than anything, like, share that hope and just like, that's a man that's dying of cancer that he only got because he gave of himself more than normal people would. It's a man that is kid's wife is losing that opportunity to spend the rest of his very healthy young life with this young family. Yet he was a little disappointed. But outside of that, he said, I'm disappointed that I don't get to stay and raise my young kids, but I've been blessed tremendously in this process. And I am resolved to, my God has plans for me that are different than what I thought. And like I said, I was in Walmart walking around when I heard those today, and I'd never heard them before. And it hit me like just a ton of bricks. Like, and you and your strength and your family, like you're just amazing. It's amazing to have watched you go through all this, to have been there for the front half of the battle, and then to just see now some, 15 years after I just feel like he would be completely honored. And I think he would be, I don't think you did anything he didn't expect you to do. I think he knew exactly who he married. And so for one, I want to say, I'm not a victim of, nor am I a first responder, but for men and women all over the place, like, thank you for taking that and championing that cause and taking it and being a voice. But for someone that loved Bob very much, like, thank you for making his memory, for me, something that will last forever, and will be a part of the history books. Really, what Bob, his life and what you've done has wrote him down in the book, in history books, and that's just something. That's a legacy that's not the most important one that he left, and that's in his children, who are godly young men and women that are seeking to follow his plans for their life in the same way that their dad did. But man, what a powerful story. Noel Bishop just chiming in, powerful words. Noel Bishop, were you in the CIA or the FBI or the D? Was he in the D? He was in one of them. He's one of my local buddies. He's a law enforcement guy. He does a lot of security training nowadays, but he's a regular commentator, and I'm actually going to be on his radio show tomorrow, in case you were wondering, 3:30, the Jeff Poole show. But no, thank you so much for coming. What would you say? What would you, to conclude your fight, his fight? People listening right now don't understand your power, like what strength in this and your courage. I never have. It's something I've always admired about you. And like, what would you say would be like no one knew Bob better than you did. Like today, we're facing another national crisis of sorts. Not of sorts. We're facing an absolute. It's crazy right now. What would Bob like? Give us some word. Like you just do him so well. Give us some advice. Give us some walking away points. Like how would Bob Roth have walked through the world? I mean, what we're facing right now, because obviously very much the same. It's an unknown enemy, right? It's something that we don't understand. It just popped up out of nowhere. Like we're fighting this fight, and I know how he did it, but like, you know, what would be something that we should walk away with just by hearing his story, by knowing him? Like just channel your Bob here and give us something that, because he would have some power. Like he's who I would call and say, what do I do here?
He would definitely have some thoughts.
He would definitely, and they would be better than. I mean, they would be good too. And you would sit down, shut up, and listen, because when Bob spoke, he
had a way of talking to people where he would correct them, and they would end up thanking him for correcting them. It was really amazing. I don't always have that gift, by the way, but he mastered it. When he passed away, I was a mom with 5 kids, 3 to 13. And I thought, wow, this is kind of daunting. And I did maintain something that he and I always maintained, and that was to achieve a goal that we had our eyes set on. And the goal that we had our eyes set on was first and foremost to love God and to raise children who love the Lord, who were champions for their country and for their family and for each other, and were hard workers. And Bob would say, no matter what the trial is, that has to be your goal. If you lose sight of that goal, you're chasing the riffraff, which is exactly what he and I prayed about during the times of the Pentagon. You cannot have your eye distracted by the riffraff, or you lose sight of the goal. And he would say that today. Do not lose sight of your goal. And he was very intentional. He had a black book that he carried all the time. You probably saw it occasionally. And he would schedule, get up in the morning. I would often find him on the floor praying in the morning before he left for work. He would start his day with prayer. He had his bag set, clothes set, food set the night before. He was up out the door very quickly because he was so efficient. But he had his time for working out, and he had his time blocked off in the evening for whatever kids want. And he would take them on bike rides. He would wrestle on the floor. He would play ball in the, whatever, help them build a fort, whatever. And we would do Bible time every evening with our family. Bible and prayer, and update each other on our day. And that was an important time then, and it's an important time now, because if you break down that communication time, even when every family has some times of not getting along or sibling rivalry or just differences of opinions, if you break that apart, you lose all connection with each other. And keeping our eyes on that goal way back then and now has been the thing that has helped him and I as a couple, and me as I've continued the walk by myself. So without God being that beacon for us, each of us would be wayward.
No, and that intentionality that you talk about is one of the things I remember. Like, in a way, Bob terrified me because I'm a very scatterbrained person, right? And so it's like, you see these guys go on Shark Tank, and I know this is a bit of a stretch, but you can see these people go on Shark Tank, and they don't have their numbers together. It's like every time I got with, like, I needed to make sure that, because he was efficient. That's a great word. Like, there was nothing he did that wasn't, he maximized every ounce of every, and just looking now at the 30,000 foot view, he got the most out of every minute that he had here. And it's like, it speaks to the intentionality of a God that truly does know where every head is, or hair is on your head, where every, and one of the things that and we're running out. I knew this one was going to be a long one because it's my show, so I don't really care. But, as we kind of wind down, I want to tie a couple things in to today, because a lot of times you talk about people that have come and gone as if they're a part of history, or that they're not, and maybe there's not. In fact, we try to do this with the Bible. We try to change it to match where we're at as a society, or as if Jesus or has changed, or as if God's word would shift with societal norms. But like the foundation of who Bob was would speak to the very core of our country and where we're at today. And he said a couple things. He said, love your country, love your God, love your family, invest in those things. And as we face now what has shifted from a health emergency to a very political I'm trying to say this without stepping on everybody's toes, but it's all about
another health emergency.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. See, that's what I'm not good at. That's not what I'm good at. I just step on everyone's toes. She's got that gift. Maybe you need to. Could you coach me up on that? Because I just run right over everybody's toes. But no, that's exactly right. And if you will walk into this thing and understand that what matters is your faith, your country, your family, almost in that order, your faith, your family, and your country. Like if you do those things, your health, you're going to take care of your health. If you're at risk, you're going to stay away. If your family's at risk, you're going to act different. If your business is at risk, you're going to act like, if you will just allow those principles to guide who you are as an American, as a Christian, as a husband, as a wife, as a kid, as whatever it is, like it will change your life. Like it will change your life. And I just, his legacy is something that is, there's very few people in my life that I deal with death I just put it all away, right? And you just lock it away and you don't deal with it and just whistle on past the graveyard and hope that they can't get you. And Bob has always been somebody that he made such an impact on my life. I can't put it away, right? And so I thank you so much for being a part of our life early on and just being willing to share your husband with us and send him on what at times probably looked like a suicide mission to try to get me off of the path I was on. But it's still today, now at 33 years old, that I lean back on things that he said to me or experiences that I had. And I just, the strength that you've exhibited in this is something that is, look, if you don't believe in God and you watched this, you're an idiot. I'm just going to say it, because what you have done is not within your power to do.
It's definitely not. It
is something that God has given you and has placed a call on your life to go and be a part of making a difference and being a part of the change. And for that, thank you for your obedience and your faith and the amount of lives that have been changed for the better because of Bob's sacrifice and then your obedience to that call. I don't know that you'll ever measure it, and I don't know that enough people stop and thank you for that, because at times it's probably pretty thankless to be just grinding away at beating the machine in Washington, right? And so for that, like, I truly want to say thank you, because there's no telling how many lives have been changed by that bill and that funding and that money. And so, man, this was awesome. This is good.
Well, could I add something?
Yeah, of course.
All right. We're all going to have things in life that get us down. And we may never hear thank you from another soul in life. But that's not the thing that matters. The thing that matters is who we're thankful to. And one thing that the kids and I focused on a lot during Bob's illness, and he participated in that with us, and after his illness, the kids and I, were how many things we were thankful for and to whom we were thankful for them. Silly things like my sister and her husband purchased a 15-passenger van like not long before Bob was diagnosed, and they were relocated to Virginia. So when I was away with Bob getting his treatments, my sister, who homeschooled, could come be with my kids and haul all the kids around in the same vehicle and take care of the kids while I was taking care of Bob. Friends came and finished our basement for us. My sister never had to leave the house to buy toilet paper or a single product because people delivered it to our house. Somebody contacted us and said, we got an email that's from someone in your church that said you would be out here for treatment, and we have a basement, and we have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths down there and a playroom. We have 10 grandchildren, so we have toys, and we're hard of hearing. And we thought, oh, the gift of hard of hearing, because we have 5 kids. We can't be disturbing these people.
Right.
But all these things that we were able to say, oh, thank you, God, for providing this thing for us that we didn't even know we needed. And when people aren't thanking you for your work, it doesn't even matter, because that's not who you're trying to please. Right. And if you keep that list of the things that you are thankful for, it will change your whole perspective. And there won't be the gloomy days, because you will be focusing on the right thing.
I guess about 7 months ago, my adopted 23-year-old son died in a car crash here locally, and I did his funeral, and it was one of the harder things I've ever done, obviously, in my life. But people would ask, like, aren't you mad? Like, he was 23. Like, aren't you upset? And the answer is truly yes. Like, at times, absolutely. But, like, I would always go back to, and everyone that's ever had a death and had a pastor come and counsel, you've heard this. And you probably, if you're not a believer, just let it go right on through. But, like, all things happen so that he will be glorified in all of it, in death and in life, and in sickness and in health. And I just think of that. I'm just reminded of that now, just thinking about the years since Bob passed, and how terrible that was, and how the anger, and look, it's okay to be mad. Like, it's okay. Like, God gets it too. Like, he gets it, because it doesn't make sense to most people, but just thinking about the glory that has been brought to God by his legacy, his life, not what he did here, although that laid the foundation, right. But what's happened since it's just unbelievable to me. And it makes it very difficult to not acknowledge, whose that we are. And it's just such a powerful story. But no, man, this has been awesome. I don't have anything else to say. I usually have like this big route. Like, we go out, we have music, we have all that. So I'm gonna try to get back there. But no, listen, we will be on the radio tomorrow at 3:30. Our show will come on early tomorrow. We'll probably do a short one, because yesterday we had a lady that wrote a book about Vietnam. They went and found the 27 graves of the Vietnam veterans. So we had a really huge one yesterday and then another big one today, and I'm kind of tired. So tomorrow will be short, and then we'll be on the radio at 3:30 with Noel Bishop on the Jeff Poole show. We have another announcement. We're still waiting on our big announcement to tell you guys. But in the meantime, if you've missed any of these, get on iTunes, Spotify, Google. I'm not a millennial. Well, I guess I am technically, but I don't do a lot of podcasting. I don't know where else you can find us, but anywhere you can get a podcast, you can find us. Hometown Heartbeat with Zach Walker. In the meantime, we'll see you guys tomorrow. We love you so much. Thank you so much for coming. It's been awesome. My wife and child are on the way to meet them for the first time, so I'm very excited about that. So, guys, love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Connor, take it away, buddy.